Flash photography is really dangerous for people who are neurodiverse, for people with epilepsy, for people with migraine, and yet it continues throughout this conference every year.
Merton local authority, after the death of George Floyd, assembled a Black Lives Matter forum. Governors, teachers, heads, etc. They created an excellent strategy to combat racial inequality in education, reflecting a vital need of our diverse community. But conference, there's a catch. 3 out of 7 of our secondary schools are run by the Tory donating carpet salesman, Lord Harris. They are not involved in this initiative.
Inclusive education that tackles prejudice and discrimination and enables everyone to learn. This is inadequate as a principle for addressing structural racism, particularly following the impact of the Black Lives Matter movement and the ongoing pandemic. The impact and legacy of colonisation and empire affects our thinking and our daily lives. It underpins racial inequalities in all government policies, including on climate change. Scotland's teachers are being supported in teaching decolonisation. The whole of the UK should be doing the same.
Last year, I was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 35. The struggles I have faced all my life, both socially and academically, as well as with anxiety, depression, eating disorders and alcohol addiction, all suddenly made sense. I support all the reference callbacks, and they need to include neurodiversity representation for our children.
Thank you, Delegate. We need to stop the leeches from sucking the lifeblood out of our NHS.
So because we know blood pressure, cholesterol and smoking hits the worst off hardest, leading to cancers, heart failure, stroke.
Because as a black ethnic minority person, I am a woman with invisible disabilities. We as a black community are adversely affected daily and lose children because of systemic and structural racism and discrimination in the system. I don't need to mention the different cases which would have been avoided, but again missed because of not just prejudice, but racial discrimination. Other people, as I said earlier, are not so lucky. 2 weeks ago, my friend Michelle Hemmings, one of the famous 5 in Birmingham, had COVID, but it was not identified in the hospital because I believe there was no knowledge of how it presents in black people.
The pandemic has made us see how fragile all of our health can be and the implications of becoming seriously ill. We owe our lives to the NHS.
Comrades, so mental health has also affected black people more than any, and I am going to take your indulgence in talking about that. 4 times more likely to die from COVID. Do you not think that during this period of time when Black Lives Matter happened, that we were additionally impacted? I have a voice in my union as a black person.
Competite on LGBT plus right.
On Saturday, our party chair mentioned trans rights and conversion therapy. On Sunday, we had a 3.5-hour debate on anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, Black Lives Matter, any other sort of bigotry. Sunday evening, straight after that motion was debated, I was in the loo downstairs with a few of my colleagues from the Northwest when I was transphobically abused in this conference centre by one of our sisters in this conference hall now. The LGBT community is one of the few that comes under constant attack alongside our black and BAME colleagues. We are under constant attack every single day. In Liverpool, just recently, this year's Pride in Liverpool, over 20 attacks were made during Pride Month on members of the LGBTQ plus community. And the police have still not been able to catch the perpetrators. Conference. We are in a period of anti-bigotry, but we're still getting bigots. It's not on. LGBTQ plus people suffer unproportionately, not just through the pandemic, but beforehand to get adequate treatment for their conditions. And the hardest thing to crack is prejudice. And this is what we need to stamp out.
Thank you, Delegate.
A social scientist and a pansexual woman, seconding COM13. LGBT+ are trans and intersex comrades. And they're non-trans comrades. Intersex people, literally the living embodiment breaking from the binary, a beautiful element of our human species. Much like racism, sexism, ableism, our struggles are not disconnected. This violence is nothing but a tool of division used to advance class violence and accelerate capitalist gain. This is a working class matter. Mainstream education deliberately fails to inform us. We are not fooled by gestures of conditional or strings-attached care, nor do we mistake this as legitimate inclusion or protection. What we fail to teach each other is being used against us. But through anti-capitalist, decolonial education, there is strength in socialist collective knowledge. The voiced experiences of violence through conversion crimes, erasure, and transphobia, as my comrades spoke today, in our own party, are here with me now. Rise to the occasion to know and do better by our comrades.
Kevin Brady of LGBT+ Labour and a councillor in Tower Hamlets. Thank you. Well, conference, the idea that progress is an unstoppable force, never to be curtailed, the idea that we can't start to slip backwards is dangerous and untrue. Hate crime is rising in the UK. 1 in 5 people still say they would be uncomfortable having gay neighbours. That rises to 1 in 4 for a trans neighbour. A majority of LGBT+ people don't feel comfortable holding their partner's hand in public. And just a few weeks ago, in my borough of Tower Hamlets, Roy Kankanamalaji was murdered in a suspected homophobic attack. Stand with our trans brothers and sisters. Stand with our non-binary members.
I stand with all my LGBT friends here as well, and my LGBT friends.
Conference, I stand before you, or sit before you otherwise, as the right wing and Tories' worst nightmare and an equal opportunities officer's wet dream. I'm a woman. I'm a refugee from Chile, thanks JC. I'm an LGBTQ person. And I'm disabled. Quite frankly, I feel I should take up a religion and then I'd have the whole bloody house.
LGBT+ committee. Comrades, you can't cure me. I'm not ill. I need no therapy. Comrades.
LGBT+ rights. Trans brothers and sisters. LGBTQ+, trans sisters, LGBTQ+ rights. I'm a cis bisexual woman and I want my trans sisters here and across the Labour movement to know that they are welcome and they are beautiful. Our LGBTQ+ family, trans brothers and sisters, trans women are women, trans men are men.
In the last few weeks, we have seen the return of the Taliban to power in Afghanistan, freeing terrorists from prison. And another terrible example of the growing threat from online extremism in the form of the incel movement. Yet the government didn't even have a security minister in place for over a month.
Comrades, I want to commend to you, and especially to the Policy Commission, the inspirational talks from LGBT people this morning, and to reaffirm that trans women and girls are our sisters.
Why are we so scared of immigration? The history of these islands is all about immigration. For centuries, immigrants have not been scroungers or criminals. They've made an immeasurable contribution to the economy. And they've enriched our culture. Let's face it, we're all descendants of immigrants. Angles, Saxons, Vikings, Normans, Huguenots, Jews, Poles, Indians, Pakistanis, Chinese, Afro-Caribbeans, Africans. The only way to unite the country, it seems, is to target and demonise people who are in some respects different. People of culture, LGBTQ+, Muslims, Gypsies, Roma travellers, Europeans. This is the root of discrimination, racism, hate, and most scary of all, extreme nationalism and ultimately fascism.
We all waited with bated breath to see Emma Raducanu be the first British woman to win a major tennis championship in 44 years. If it wasn't for her immigrant parents, we would still be waiting. We need immigrants economically, socially, culturally, in sports, gastronomically. I mean, I love my bangers and mash, but if we're not well known for the flavour of our cuisine, imagine England without curry.
Leicester East has always believed in the importance of diverse representation. At the 1987 general election, we saw a Labour gain from the Tories and the election of one of the first ethnic minority MPs, who was known as one of the Gang of Four. It was a great step forward for the party. Taking the knee is a sign of respect. It is a sign of support to those that fight for equality every day. It is a symbol and a pledge of allegiance to the cause. But it's not enough. We need a government which will stand up for black communities so that they receive the same treatment and the same support from statutory services, the police, the justice system, which everyone else receives automatically. The Labour Party must prepare the ground now to develop a policy that black people are looking for to ensure that the next Labour government is ready and willing to give black people an equitable opportunity in everyday life from day one.
Many workplaces having to revisit and set up anti-racism strategy and training in their workplaces. In some places, this has been emotional and psychology and at the cost of black, Asian and minority ethnic workers as they're being asked to feed into or act as consultants on their employers' anti-racism plans. This is likely to impact on their mental health and well-being because they're being exposed to everyday racism they experience in the form of microaggressions.
Conference, this motion also calls for an increase in funding for specialist, person-centred frontline services. Specialist services for black women, minority ethnic women, disabled women, neurodivergent women, migrant women and trans women.
For daring to express beliefs which she is imperfectly entitled to hold. Conference, I stand with Rosie Duffield and even if I disagreed with her, I will defend to the death her right to express her views without being subjected to a torrent of misogynist abuse.
Delegate, that's... so everybody can... I think Yasmin, when she was chairing, said this really nicely yesterday. Like, let's listen to each other respectfully and let's not boo and heckle each other.
Misogyny is epitomised by the incel movement and their terrorist tactics. Conference, we have to obliterate misogyny.
There is no conflict between defending working class interests and pushing for equality for black people, because today's working class is multi-ethnic, multi-faith and multilingual. Racist stereotyping about black people, even in jest, is unacceptable. It is prejudicial and it causes racial trauma to both the individual and the group who experience it. Racism, institutional and structural racism, racism, systemic racism and racial inequality of opportunity. You see that has happened to black people, that black people still face. So that's why I'm no longer talking to white people about racism. I'm talking to white allies who are standing up and calling out racism, because they know it's time's up to end the indignities, the inequalities and injustices black people face, because we know that racism is a burden that threatens our very existence. Racism.
Carol Sewell, Black, Asian and Minority Ethnic Representative. It's a pleasure to be here today. It's now 16 months since the murder of George Floyd, which I myself and others are still feeling the pain from his untimely death. It's caused so much of us distress to this very day. We, as Black, Asian and minority ethnic members, want to see the real change within the Labour Party, and that's why I'm here, to make sure the change for inclusivity. There is not enough of us as Black, Asian minority members. That is why I want to make that change. I'm so proud to be a Labour member, and I want to say to members that we certainly want to ensure that everyone is treated equally.
As I speak with our black brothers and sisters and our white allies, the Tories' immigration policies are racist, conference. Institutional racism, and we don't use these words lightly, and I just wanted to clarify the definition of scum in the Oxford English Dictionary. The Oxford English Dictionary refers to it as a very bad or immoral person or group of people. So I believe that there was some factual correctness when it was referenced earlier in the week.
I'm Sam Manley, the CLP BAME officer for Dulwich and West Norwood.
Councillor Elizabeth Baptiste, representing BAME Labour. We all know what happened to George Floyd, who pleaded for his life saying, "I can't breathe." In April this year, Derek Chauvin, the white former Minneapolis police officer, was found guilty of murdering George in May 2020. That verdict was about holding Derek Chauvin to account.
Because as a descendant of enslaved people, I have no idea what my name is. I'm using the name of an enslaver because that was stolen from me. Also stolen, my language, my culture, my faith. If I tried to track down where my family come from, I struggled then with the Berlin Conference of 1884 that decided to carve up Africa so the West could steal its resources. So the country that I came from may not even exist, or has borders that no longer exist to be able to track them down. We talk about George Floyd. We know he was murdered not because he was black, but because he was African. Or a hurricane in Haiti. The island is devastated and people have to leave and become refugees to be whipped trying to get into America to safety. When African lives matters, we will stop talking about corrupt African leaders and remember that the choice that the West gives them is to be corrupt or to face assassination or coups. When African lives matters, we will have reparations.
We cannot have structural sexism, sexual harassment and bullying in our own trade unions and labour movement, but sadly, conference, in some areas, we do. Where we have inequality, hierarchy and silencing, where we have racism, transphobia, sexism and any other form of discrimination, we are breaching our democratic participation and letting down all our members.
My name is Councillor Bashir Ibrahim and I am proud to have become a councillor in May this year in a by-election, one of the first black male councillors in Islington in over 3 years. This is the government who want to whitewash a report to say that there is no institutional racism in the UK when, comrades, we know that there is institutional racism. We are in a situation where the Conservative Party have more black male MPs than the Labour Party. That is a great shame for us. We are the natural home for black communities, and black communities must know that we will always have their back. But we must demand more from our party, our government and society, because guess what? Black lives matter today and every day.
Comrades.
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 Comrades, conference, it cannot be right that 51% of children in our prison system are black, Asian or from a minority ethnic background.